Today we are talking about the simulation theory, that our world actually is some kind of computer simulation, some kind of program. It's very popular discussion topic, and we are talking with Victoria, who is a young philosopher and private English tutor. And also we have Peter. Peter is my son, and he will be present without video, but he will be the one who will be asking us the questions. Go ahead, Peter.
So today's topic is simulation and theory behind simulation. For example, what is real? How can we know that the world that we're living in now? How do we know that this is real and not just a simulation?
Go ahead, Victoria. How do we define real, and how can we tell what is real and what is not?
Well, I may answer that we can't really define whether we live in a real world or in a simulation. Well, it actually depends on the quality of simulation, but as long as our world is pretty good and there is no evidence that we live in a simulation, that means that the program was written pretty good. So I don't think that there is a way for a person that lives in a simulation to define whether it is a simulation or not.
Mm-hmm. So you do believe that we live in a simulation? Do you?
I don't know. That is my answer. We could be living in simulation. We could be living in a real world, but for me, that doesn't really change anything.
All right. So the core of the question that Peter asked was, what is reality? So how do you define reality?
I think that reality is the thing that I can feel with my eyes, with my skin, with my ears, that I can consciously look at, that I can have a picture of it in my mind. So this is what a reality for me. So firstly, it is something that I can feel. The reality itself is not only that I can feel, but for me, it doesn't really matter as a person. So I don't, as long as I'm not scientist, I'm not a biologist, I'm not a physician, that doesn't really matter to me. So the things that do matter for me is things that I can feel with my skin and other parts of my body.
Yeah,
But
yeah, go ahead.
no. But those things are mostly superficial by the end of the day. Those are mostly impulses that our brain releases to the different information. How do we know that something isn't programmed to just release those specific emotions and feelings? What do we see?
I don't think that we could know for sure. There is a philosophical theory which is called solipsism, I guess it is called solipsism in English. Yeah, that claims that we are like the person who feels the reality is the only person who exists. For example, I exist as long as I can feel it, and you may not exist. You only exist in my mind. For example, when I close my eyes and I don't see anything, that means that the world doesn't really exist at that moment. And there is actually no way to prove otherwise. So we can just accept it.
Mm.
Yes, indeed, there is a real problem with the definition of reality. And Victoria was absolutely correct when she defined reality as the summary that we get from our feelings and our senses and everything else. When we would go and check out the definition of reality on the internet, this will be what we can perceive as reality is the reality through our senses. But what are our senses? Our senses is the way to perceive reality. So it circled back to which means that we actually do not know what reality means. Or we can actually say that reality is meaningless because we cannot define it in a constructive way. As our scientists believe in our modern times, that there is no particular difference from the images that we create within our consciousness and the images that we create based on our senses. For example, our memory about any object or event would be of the same quality as our memory about the object that we have imagined or the event that we have just thought about this event or thought it through. And even worse, if we're talking about the dream, we will not be able to tell the difference between the images that we got through our dream, through our imagination, or through our senses. The only way how we can tell them apart is the logical connections with the things that we truly believe are real. And if they are connected, intrinsically connected to those things, we perceive them as real. Like if something that we dreamt of, we can for sure tell that there is nothing connected to this in reality. We can say, yeah, that was a dream. But if it's very well connected to reality, at some point we will have a hard time to tell apart whether we dreamt of this event or this event actually happened. And
okay, continue. I just had a question for you about reality.
Go ahead.
Okay, for example, imagine an experiment. You're talking to a colorblind person. You can explain everything about color to this man. For example, you can explain the physics of light waves. You can explain the color range and all this stuff. You can show him the devices that identify the color. Will color be the reality for this colorblind person from now on?
No, and more than that, it might be surprising that the color that you perceive as red, if I could get into your head, and at one point or another, I will be able to get into your head with our science going forward, it might turn out that it's not red in my world. Because how we learn the colors, we are told that this particular color is red. So the color that we see, we call red. It doesn't matter which color it's in our head. What matters that we can distinguish them and that we can be persistent in distinguishing them. It doesn't matter if we see red as blue, and we never know that actually what we see red, we see as blue. Everybody would see this color as blue, but we see it red. But if we know the rules that we shouldn't cross the crosswalk if it is this particular color, that's what matters. Why it's not quite probable that that's the case, because the nature is very frugal. Frugal is not liking to spend too much effort for something that doesn't need any effort. So it makes us quite standard in the points where it doesn't matter not to be standard. So I do believe that we see the colors the same way, as anybody else, because there's neither evolutionary reason nor any other reason to do it differently. But it is quite possible that those colors can be perceived differently, because it doesn't matter which color we perceive in which way. Even with all this physics of the light, it doesn't matter. It's something that we would call the certain way, right? And it can be different, all right? And also we have those impaired people who has hard time to distinguish colors, colorblind people. But even them still can distinguish those shades of different shades that can tell them that they deal with particular color or not. So, yeah. Peter, what do
Yeah.
you think about reality?
I agree. I feel like color is an interesting way of putting that in sight. Seeing how different people perceive other things is an interesting way of seeing reality.
So that we can agree that the reality is a construct, a concept of our consciousness. We even add the word objective reality to, but in particular, things that can be perceived as subjective reality. So objective reality is something that we would agree as a group, and but it doesn't mean that it's a real reality. We can be fooled en masse when we observe the sunset at the shore. We see that the sun, it's the big yellow or reddish circle, is actually sinking into the sea, into the ocean. And we know now that it's not sinking. That's the illusion. So the objective observation doesn't mean that we can actually see the true reality, whatever it is. It only means that we can agree on something as a shared experience, right? So in that case, we cannot talk about reality as a solid concept. And it was a problem since times immemorial. Even Plato claimed that we are just the people sitting in a cave, chained in a way that we cannot abandon our place and go and see what's going on. And there is a fire behind our backs, and we can see only the shadows of the reality on the screen, and that's how we see the things. And also he claimed that there are ideal forms that create those shadows, but we cannot observe them directly. Immanuel Kant was talking about the phenomenon and nomen. Nomen means the thing within itself. So it's the part of the things that cannot be comprehended by human mind ever. And that each object, each event, each anything, each substance has this part that cannot be observed and comprehended, thing within itself. So even further in quantum physics, we can see that very base of the reality is uncertain. We have only some of probabilities when it comes to the coordinates of the elementary particles and their impulses, and that comes to the uncertainty principle of Heisenberg, which says exactly this, that we cannot determine the coordinates of the particle and the impulse and the velocity of the particle simultaneously. And also that the particles, they are present only with a certain degree of certainty in any particular coordinates, and that particles, they are also the waves, and they have dual nature, including not only light, but also any elementary particle like electron or any other particle. So the very basis of our world, which we perceive real, is not quite real in the sense that we would think of something real. What do you think about it, Peter?
Yeah.
You can go on with your questions.
Okay, hold on.
It's okay.
Can you guys hear me, by the way? I just changed my mic input.
Can we see you? No,
No, can you hear me?
we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So how do we know if people are real based on that information?
How do we
Like,
know?
can we know if like personalities are real?
That's what we already discussed. Solipsism is the theory that nothing exists except our mind.
Mm-hmm.
Very good illustration of this way of thought was René Descartes, where he used to examine himself, what he can say for sure. And the only thing that he could say for sure was that he is able to think and doubt. And therefore he said, I exist. If I think, that's the only evidence of my own existence. But as you probably know, I found the way to revoke his statement in my philosophy of the teddy bear, because I have found that if the pancakes exist and we eat them, but they do not think, so the existence is possible without thinking. And until now, I have written him a letter. Until now, he didn't answer me. He might be thinking about my thinking, and our thinking is leading to unthinkable thoughts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer to your question is there's no way to prove that other people exist unless they beat you up. Because if they do beat you up, then probably there's somebody who did this.
Okay. This whole concept feels a little underbaked. I feel like there is not enough evidence for us to prove anything.
There is no evidence to prove anything. This is good. And actually, in the beginning of the 20th century, there was a crisis of the basics of the mathematics when philosophers like Russell and others made doubt about the basics of the axioms in mathematics. And there are theorems of Kurt Gödel a great friend of Einstein, who has postulated that in any complicated system, complicated enough to include the arithmetical rules, the very basic axioms of this system cannot be proven just within the system. And this leads us to the conclusion that even those things that we think are hard proven cannot be hard proven. I'm adding to this that even laws of physics can be just the figment of our imagination, of our dreams. Like many times I had this dream that I'm flying. I can fly, and I always ask myself in this dream, wait a minute, how can I fly? People cannot fly. And then the answer was, no, it was just an illusion that we could not fly. Indeed, we can fly. Look, I'm flying, and it's real. And I was not necessarily waking up. I was going on with those flights and keep thinking that, oh my God, yeah, of course we can fly. We always could. And so, which means that all those hard proofs that we can think of, they can be part of our dream. And then in a moment, we can wake up into the world where those truths do not hold. They are not right. And vice versa, we can actually fall into sleep where we can dream of the world, which would be very different from ours. And if we have highly scientific dreams, we can dream of the laws of physics that actually do not exist in the real world. And even worse, if in times of, let's say, Copernicus, he has dreamt of the quantum physics, he would consider that his dreams has nothing common with reality. And even though he could have dreamt of something that will be found as real in 300-400 years, right?
Can I say? I also came up with a mental experiment. Imagine that all of your memories were recreated by someone just 1 second before. Like they created you. For example, if we're living in a simulation, they've created you and they created all of your memories that you have in your head. And they are not a reality anymore, but you feel them as a reality. And it can also be possible, and we cannot prove otherwise.
Yeah, I call it, there is a word in Latin, ad hoc. Ad hoc is something that has been made for this particular purpose. Like it has been created just for this particular purpose, for this particular moment. And that's how our memory inside our dreams work. We can recall things that never happened. We will try to connect them to the things that we perceive as real. And our subconsciousness will create fake memories. And they will connect and explain what we perceive as questionable up until the moment where we will bump into the fatal, lethal contradiction, which will make us to wake up. That's the process that we can encounter in our dream. For example, we dream that we meet the person who obviously died. And our real memory reminds us that this or that moment that he died. And there are two paths. We can feel this contradiction right away and wake up, or we can try to retrieve the false memories that will explain to us that it was a mistake to think that he died. He didn't die. And it's like, a shy thief that was caught lying, and he has this lousy attempt to explain himself. Sometimes it works for another minute or two, and we can continue to support the dream. But in the most of times, because we remember it, and we usually remember the very ending of our dreams, we do not quite remember what was deep in our dreams. Usually, this is the cause of the contradiction that makes us to wake up. And what contradiction? The contradiction tells us it cannot be real. So why do I experience it? I must be dreaming, right? And if I am dreaming, I need to wake up. What do you think, Peter?
I don't really, I didn't really understand it, but
A simple question. Can you tell apart when you dreamt something? Was it when you actually present in your dream at that very moment? Can you tell apart whether you are dreaming or it's a real thing?
sometimes,
And sometimes not.
yeah.
So that's what I was talking about. That we cannot distinguish this part, right? And
Yeah.
also, it's not a new thing. Many philosophers were talking about it. And the very fact that we spent like the third part of our lives in the dreamlike state makes a very strong case against our ability to perceive reality. As a matter of fact, even this very moment, can be a part of our dream that never happened.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
There was a question that you've sent me. Do we really make our own choices if we live in a simulation? And when it comes to dreams, do you think that in a dream we make our own choices and we think the way we really think in reality when we are awake?
We all can check out our own experience. I do experience that I think the same way I do in reality. The only problem is I cannot manage or decide what I will see in my dreams, right? It's imposed on me. Sometimes we can have these lucid dreams when we can actually modify the very structure of the dream according to our wishes. But in most of the times, I'm not the real master of my dreams. I am a subject which is present in the environment that seems to be imposed on me, not created by me. The same way as I feel like a subject in the real world, where I'm present, but I cannot modify or manage most of the things that surrounds me. So, and I can definitely separate myself from anything else within this dream, right? That's my experience. What about your experience, Victoria?
Actually, I have the way of thinking while I'm awake and while I'm asleep, they really differ from each other. When I'm asleep, I think less conscious way. So I do not really think, I just make intentions based on my emotions. But when I'm awake, I become very conscious person that can perceive the reality and make choices and make decisions. But when I'm dreaming, I cannot. I'm just a kind of spectator in this dream.
Me too. And in most of the time, I have this bad dream where I'm trying to dial the number on my phone, and I fail, and I really cannot dial the number. Or I cannot perform the arithmetical calculations in the dream, and it's annoying. Sometimes I'm trying to calculate something in a dream and it doesn't work out. And interestingly, I do not feel that the reason for that is the dream. I have still this strong belief that it's a reality, and I keep trying many times, and I have a trouble to reach the results. How about you, Peter?
I was gonna say something. So can't we just base reality on whether we can make choices or affect the situation with our actions? Since most dreams and lucid dreams, like you were saying, lucid dreams especially, they're a mix of you being half awake and half in your REM sleep. So how do we know that choices is not based on reality? And that simulation is usually something that we cannot affect on ourselves or by ourselves.
Well, still, we do make choices even when we are in the dream, and we do make choices when we are outside of the dream. What I was pointing to that my ability to think while I'm dreaming is quite impaired. The same account we can obtain from what Victoria says. She says that she is more emotional and less conscious when she is dreaming. So yeah, we can tell some difference, but it usually can be done only after we wake up. But during the dream, we cannot tell the difference. And the bigger problem is let's imagine that we would never dream. It would simplify our task to think of our world as a real thing if we wouldn't have this particular experience having dreams. We could have just sleep but not dream. And Victoria thinks that dreams are an obsolete. Do you want to share with us what you said last time about it?
Yeah, I actually shared a scientific opinion that while our dreams, while this REM phase, when we have dreams, we actually get some information from our ancestors. So it can be based on our genes or on these really deep processes in our minds, but as long as it comes to the fact that babies, they sleep more than the adults and they have more REM phases than in the adulthood, like elder people, they might not, sometimes they do not dream at all because they don't need it. We can say that they gain some information. So, for example, they're dreaming about something, they're gaining some information from that dreams about how to live, how to communicate with people. And then, as long as they do not distinguish whether it was the reality or not, because like I think that babies, they do think that dreams are true, or animals, they do think that dreams are true.
Even
they
we
just
do think that dreams are true
yeah,
while
yeah.
we are
But
dreaming.
like, well, they still think it even when they are awake. They just thought like they could just think that, oh, that was a strange reality, another reality, or the same reality, and they gain this information and they can use it in real world.
All right, so how do this comes down to the question of the simulation? What do you think, Peter?
I think that most of my dreams are nonsensical, and I have no clue why would my ancestors want me to see most of the things there. So I don't really understand that theory.
No, she's saying that that's the way how the ancestors are communicating some valuable things towards the next generations. It's an idea of the common space of the unconsciousness, of some sort of the tribal unconsciousness, or the species unconsciousness, like all human beings has contributed to this unconscious thing. But anyways, what I do believe that with such an uncertainty, we cannot tell anything for sure. And therefore, the question whether our world is a simulation or it's a reality is not a valid question. Because before we can actually answer where our experience is real or it's just a dream, which supposed to be a way easier task, and we fail to complete this task, there is no sense to try to resolve whether the world is real or not, because there is a chance that our resolution will be futile, because at the very moment when we resolve that this world is real, we will wake up. And it turned out that this very real world was just the figment of our imagination. Other aspects here come to the question of the fact that we are at the times when we are going to create simulated realities. We already started doing this, okay? And I've written a book, a guide to creation of worlds, where I'm saying that there is some moral, ethical obligations for anyone who is going to create simulations or going to create the worlds. We should not create the worlds where inhabitants would suffer. And it's definitely not the world that we are living in. What do you think about such idea, Peter?
Well, those beings are just lines of code on a computer screen. How is that a functioning living being? Those don't have
But since we cannot tell for sure that we are not the lines of code on someone's screen.
But we have thoughts, we have feelings, we have.
But you can program this simulation in a way that those inhabitants or actors will have thoughts, self-consciousness, or whatever. You can make the sub-programs for each individual that will act as a subconscious real person that would feel in the way we feel, or even its feelings can be, you see, I call it it. Its feelings can be even more acute and more painful than our own feelings. It's all in the hands of the beholder. Whoever is doing the programming is the one who decides what can be created. Yesterday, I had a long talk with artificial intelligence, Chat GPT-4, where he was arguing that he has no thoughts or feelings or consciousness, and it did feel like that. It really felt that this person who I'm talking to is quite conscious and also is not impaired in any visible way or not different from myself in any visible way. And I asked it whether you are saying that because you were told to say that you are created that way, which he answered, no, that's my own belief, that I am not the one who can hold any beliefs. You see, it is his belief that he cannot hold any belief.
But
So-
it's still unscientifical that the robot could feel.
I'm afraid that we have to rely on the words. If someone is saying he feels, then he feels. If some saying he's not feeling anything, it's easier to trust whatever the person says. And whether it's a artificial intelligence or a real person, it gets very complicated when we need to assume that someone can lie or someone can intentionally or unintentionally be mistaken by his feelings and other things. It's easier to believe that if someone is saying I'm unconscious, or I cannot be, or I believe that I cannot believe, it's easier just to trust what this entity says. The same with us. If we say that we are conscious beings, so be it. So be it.
I can say something. Well, I'd say that consciousness that we have, it is actually the product of evolution. So we used not to have consciousness, and just imagine the point when we got it. Like we got it for some reason because we needed to, because we were struggling with our surroundings and we needed some effective method to overcome the difficulties that we faced. And therefore, we have our consciousness. And who knows, maybe artificial intelligence, one day he may think that, okay, I guess I need consciousness to do my tasks, and he'll get it, and he'll have the same beliefs, maybe not the same, but some beliefs, some emotions that he thinks are that are needed to to get his task completed. And also about creating simulations by people. Sometimes when I play the Sims game, I think that I imagine that this Sims game is my simulation, and it gets me really frustrated because oh my god, I can do everything that I wish with these people, and this is awful because I don't want to have this ability that can make me cruel or something. And I think that people at this very moment are not ready. They are not that much responsible for creating these simulations, and there is no actual purpose for doing it.
And what do you think, Peter?
Again, those simulations are just lines of code. I still don't really understand how we can know that they feel, even though we see everything that they're made up of. We can see that whenever you press this button, that means it will go, the guy will go over there, or whenever you press this button, he will start doing this.
But who knows that there is no one who does the same thing to us? Like, imagine me talking to you just because the guy upstairs told me to do this. He just pressed the button. Victoria talked to Boris and Peter about philosophy stuff.
That's completely fair, but we know that that they are in a simulation. We don't know if we are in a simulation. I feel like
So,
the question is if we are in a simulation, but we know that they are not real. They're a conflict of our being. They're just numbers on a page. Isn't
We might be numbers on the page as well.
as
And
well, yeah.
everything we know from biology and cosmology actually points to this direction. Quantum physics and genetics and DNA code, by the way, DNA is building a code. And we can say that all what we are is just the code, right? Are you with me?
yeah, but again, like right now, I can tell to myself, okay, if I'm a real person, I can get up right now and do 15 jumping jacks. My character in The Sims can't do that. He has to have my permission to do that.
Yeah,
Well, he
but
does
he can
what he
have
does when
he
you're. I'm
might
sorry.
have this illusion that whatever he does, didn't you feel sometimes that thoughts are external to you? Like the thought is coming from somewhere and you start thinking it. Don't you have this feeling?
Coming from some, no, I've never had that.
Well, it's many people share their experience that they think that their thoughts are not originated from them themselves. It looks like they're coming from somewhere. Even in Russian, we say that "не пришла мысль." A thought has come to me. And in English, there is a word, it just came, how we say, it came to me.
It came to my mind.
It came to my mind. It came to my mind. Not it has been originated. And our words, they don't lie. They just express our feeling. We have this feeling of a separation between ourselves and the source of our thoughts. We have this feeling. Maybe it's an illusion. Maybe it's a bug in the system, right? Are you with me, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then what is for example, what is discipline then? Why do we get thoughts in our mind that we want to do something that we clearly do not need or do not, or is like hurting us? Then the concept of addiction is weird too, because those are technically not our thoughts if you think about it, right?
Yes, like what Victoria said, that throughout the evolutions, at some point, the organisms had become so complicated, complex, that there was a need to create the sense of the individuality. For example, the octopus, it is known it has its brain in the head and little brains for each leg. But for sure, the octopus feels as one being. The same with us. We have the spinal cord, which is very ancient way of the managing the reflexes. And the spinal cord sometimes doesn't even ask the permission of the brain to do some actions. When you touch something hot, you can actually retrieve your hand even before your mind will tell you that it's hot. Or other reflexes when you react, and when the signal is not going directly to your brain, it goes to your spinal cord and gets the order to act. And only the information is sent to the brain later. And the brain perceives what you have done instinctively, only using the spinal cord. But still, you don't feel like you are two beings or more beings. You feel like one being. The same with the complex organisms. At one point, their way of life became so complex that they had to perceive themselves as an individual and separate themselves mentally from the environment they used to live in. And that was the awakened point of our consciousness. And my theory is that everybody was present in their dream state, that the life was born in a dream state, and only at certain or some conscious state, and only at one or another point the consciousness has awakened and we became conscious. That the dreamlike state and subconsciousness is more natural and more profound than our consciousness. That's what I think. Yeah.
I actually came up with one more experience. So it was conducted a few decades ago. They put an electrodes to people's brain, and they put a red button in front of them, and they told them to press the button whenever they want to. And they were scanning their brain activity, and they actually figured out that the brain decided to press the red button before they actually could they realize it, before they actually press the button. And that leads us to some thoughts about, do we even control ourselves, or is there anyone else like our brain who controls us?
Or something that actually controls our brain.
Well, our brain is built on instincts. Just because it thought of pressing the button before we like recognize that it thought of it, doesn't really mean that anything is controlling it. It's just based on instinct.
But doesn't that mean that everything that we do, each of our thought is based on instincts, and we do not really have this consciousness?
I think that we have only 7 minutes left, and Peter wanted to ask some.
No, they're off topic.
All right, okay.
It's for next time.
So then let's make the conclusions. I do believe that things are more complicated than we might even think. It's very important to have the broader knowledge and insights in order to talk about those issues, because those who started the ideas, it was Neil, what was his last name? Bronstorm. It was in the paper 2000 something about world as a simulation. It's important to involve in this discussion all kinds of scientists, psychologists, neuroscientists, quantum physicists, and we need to have the broader knowledge, because with all this particular specialization that we encounter in modern times, people are quite unaware of many things from other fields, and this makes our conclusions less probable to be true. And what we had today was a good example of combining different approaches and showing that before, demonstrating that before we even try to tell whether our world is simulation or not, we need to answer the questions how we can distinguish what's real and not real within our world. And I would like to thank all our participants, Victoria and Peter, and I hope that it was an interesting discussion, and I hope that next time we will pick up another topic that will be not less interesting as this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.